Alright, welcome to the next tutorial on loops. Today we're going to take another look at a previous exercise that we've done with our age checking program. Now with this exercise we are going to try and build them into a loop into the program to make sure that the program continues to ask the question of how old they are until they type in a valid number. So in the past we had something being plugged in of, say, a letter, and it's going to be popping up down the bottom of please type in numbers only, but then the program was actually finishing, which in this case is not going to be quite what we're after. We want it to keep asking the question until they type in something which meets one of these criteria here. We can also then go through and ask whether they'd like to try again, and one of the ways that we can do that is by using a new data type that we're going to introduce today called a Boolean. A Boolean is a data type that has one of two values. It's either true or it's false. So a good example of this would be, is it time to go home yet? So it's either true or false. There are no in-betweens, there's only one or two options for this. So if it's 3:15 and after, you're able to go home. The bell time's gone, it's time to go home. Otherwise it's false. Alright, so in order to declare a Boolean data type, we're going to give it a name, and I'm going to call it valid for this. And we use as Boolean, and you'll notice that pops up. And when we're wanting to declare a Boolean, just for clarity's sake, it's a good idea to go through and set the initial value that you'd like it to begin with. So what I'm going to say that to begin with, it's valid equals false, because what I want to try and do is wrap all of this situation here in a loop so that it's going to keep asking the question of please enter your age until they type in something that is considered valid, which is a number. So if I set this to begin with as false, and then I'm going to structure a loop across the top here. So remember last time we used a loop to try and make sure something run at least or one or more times, and by doing a conditional check at the top there, of course, we don't quite get that. If we wanted it to run at least one or more times, we'd do the conditional check at the bottom. At this situation here, I'm going to do a conditional check at the top, and the check that it's going to check for is against this loop. Against this Boolean. So in order to do that, we're going to say while valid is equal to false, which in this case, straight away, it is equal to false because that's what I set it as to begin with. And then I'm just going to come down and click on the next line, and you'll notice how everything condensed across. Okay, we've got a problem which is with the blue underlining, which is saying while must end with a matching end while, and that's where you want the loop to finish. So if I was just to do it straight under here, that wouldn't be quite right because it would be stuck doing these lines of code here, which is nothing. So I'd like to wrap this situation here around all of this. So while they haven't typed in the correct answer, it's going to go through and work out which of these situations is considered okay. So I'm going to stick that at the very, very bottom of our code, and then do an end while at the bottom. Okay, so that means that while they haven't typed in something correctly, it's going to go through and do all of this stuff here. Now remember what I mentioned last time, the fact that when we start using a do while or while loops, we can get stuck in an infinite loop, which means that's going to be the case in this situation because there's nothing that will change the loop from false to true, meaning the loop is going to continually run. In this case, that might not be such a bad thing. We want the program to keep running, to keep asking the question of their age. Okay, so at the moment, if I was to try and run this program, push F5, try and make the thing work. How old are we? We're going to type in something incorrectly. It's going to pop up, ask the question, please type in numbers only. In our previous example, that was pretty much the end statement that would appear, and then the program would finish. Now, however, because we've got the loop, and we start typing this in, I've actually pushed enter a few times. It's not quite popping up as I expect. I've just realized what I've done here is I've actually missed this line of code here, which is actually asking the question of how old you are. That's why when I pushed the enter twice button, it wasn't actually showing up with that logical statement. So I'm going to stop the program and just tweak this a little bit. The concept that was actually trying to reinforce, accidentally mind you, was sequence. Because of sequence, it was starting at the top, hitting the loop, and then it was getting stuck inside the loop, and because this was done earlier, it was never repeating it again. Now when we rerun it, it's going to always keep asking the same question of how old you are. So we're going to type in now, I'm going to type in a letter, which is going to jump down to the catch statement, and our try catch statement. and it's not going to like that. Push enter again, and there it is. It's asking the question. It's hit the bottom of our loop, it's popped back up the top there, and it said valid still equal to false. That hasn't been changed, and it's going to re-ask this question. So I'm now going to type in an age that we consider ridiculous, but outside of our boundary, and we get that impossible situation. It does the pause down the bottom of our page. Here's our pause occurring, and now it's going to hit this end while, and then want to go back up towards the top. I'll just reverse. I'll just delete some of these things out just so we can see it all happening on our screen together at the same time. And I might just reduce this down as well, so now we can see the whole statement occurring. So if I was to put a breakpoint in here and try and rerun that, you can see the flow of the logic may be a little bit easier. So valid at the moment set to false. False is equal to false. Yes, it is. So it's going to do all of the stuff in here. F10 to the next line. It's going to ask the question. It's going to try and assign what I type into the console to this variable called age, which is expecting integers. Going to type in a valid age, which should be entering into the teenager realm. Okay, it's going through now and checking which of these conditions is true. If 15 is less than 0, no it's not. Or 15 is greater than 120, no it's not. So it will skip this line of code and jump down to the next condition. Is 15 less than 2? No it's not. Is 15 less than 3? No it's not. Is 15 less than 12? No it's not. Is 15 less than 20? Yes it is. This line of code gets triggered. It will then jump towards the bottom there, out of the end if, because it's now finished, and then you can see it will give us a pause to the screen to allow us to see what's occurring on the page. Here's our outputted response, and then focus back onto our program here. It goes back into our code, and it's going to want to continue back through and keep asking the loop. But you can see with our loop now that there's nothing to ever stop it. It's always going to continue through no matter what we type in. So you might have a program that you've developed that you want it to keep going again and again. Okay, so this could be something that is something that you're after. The problem with a loop is that when it is stuck in a loop like this, it is working pretty hard out, and it's just going as hard as it possibly can. The reason why we see the delays and it's working quite nicely is because of this statement here of console.readline. Without the console.readline, it's going to go through and just continually do things really quickly until it's asking for information to be plugged in. Okay, so here's another one that's going to do the read line. If I was to take that as well, it's going to pretty much just go very, very quickly and cause us problems. So it's those read lines which are causing the delay, which is quite handy. But sometimes if we don't have those kinds of situations and it does get stuck in an infinite loop, that's not really what we're after, to have that work happens all the time. Because the reason for that is because if it's working all the time, it means everything other processes are also being slowed. So if there are other parts of the program, they won't get looked at because it's putting all its time and effort into completing these loops here. So one of the ways that we want to try and ensure that we don't get caught in an infinite loop is to change this statement here from being valid equals false to valid equals true. So as soon as we've gone through and had something entered in here that is okay, we then want to change this to be valid equals true. So I could do it under these situations here. I could do it after each line saying valid equals true, valid equals true, valid equals true. Okay, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do valid equals true at the very bottom. And the reason for that is that if I type in something that is valid equals true, such as a number, it will complete one of these situations here, and because of sequence it will then pop out the bottom of my end of code, complete this statement, and then hit the loop, pop back up the top there, and it will notice, hey look, valid is not equal to false, it's now equal to true, and it will skip all of this stuff again in the middle. Alright, so when we go and try and test the program now, valid set to false to begin with, push F10, we're going to jump down and the question is going to be asked of how old we are. Here's the console window that pops up, type in our age of 15, program's going to jump through to the appropriate statement which is considered true, which is our teenager statement, and then the next thing it's going to go through after that is going to jump to the bottom of the end if, and then it's going to want to continue on with this Boolean change which we just did before. So it was valid equals false, and if we push F10, the next time we go back to it, valid is now equal to true. It will then pop down to the end while. I'll display that statement teenager to begin with. Okay, and then when we push F10, go back up to the next line of code. It's now going to be pop checking this item here. If valid is, which is now true, true is equal to false, which doesn't make sense, it's going to skip out the bottom of this, and then the program will finish. Okay, so you can see it's now just popped all the way down to the bottom there, to the end sub, which is going to make the program finish. Okay, so that's how you can use a Boolean loop or a Boolean check to see whether you'd like to continue a program a number of times. We could have gone through and used an integer variable to maybe count down, and they get 5 goes at giving things a turn. There are other ways that we can actually try and rerun this program. So for instance, we might want to ask the questions of, would you like to try again after the program? So after we've received the correct answer from this, we might seem to want to try and build something else, and where the person will type in, would you like to play again? We're going to try and do that, an example of that in our next exercise, which is to do with random numbers, and we're going to try and build a few of these extra concepts all into quite a large project now. So we'll do that on our next example.